Welcome to Coastal Front. Join us each week as we sit down with the movers and shakers of Vancouver to discuss stories of business, politics, accomplishment, and failure. Our aim is to keep you dialed into what matters most in our city. Now, here's your host, Andrew Johns.
All right, I'm so glad to have you here, David Cavey. You're the Vancouver Centre candidate running for the upcoming federal election for the Conservative Party.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm so happy to have you. So let's go right into this. You are running against one of the most incumbent Liberals in Canada, Hedy Fry. She's been in this riding as the head of this riding since 1993. And I understand that that's actually even maybe 2 years before you were born.
That's right, yeah.
So basically, since you were an infant, she's been the MP for Vancouver Centre. And you finally come. I mean, this could be the Serena Williams, Bianca, I forget how you pronounce her last name.
I think it's like
Andresio moment, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to have you here. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your views and what would a Vancouver Centre voter want to think about when they're considering you versus Hedy Fry. And we can talk about party. Obviously Conservative Party is the biggest party in Canada alongside the Liberal Party. You two are the big behemoths. But we can also talk about your own individual strengths and what you would bring to your constituents in Vancouver Centre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So let's start off by just how did you get into this position in the first place? Have you run for office before?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
I was involved with the executive at McGill when I went to McGill.
Okay.
So that was not too long ago.
Yeah.
And I was the treasurer.
You mean
there.
on student executive or something like that?
The Conservative Association at McGill.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And when I joined, Harper was in power.
Yeah.
And so we met a lot of the ministers as they would come through, and it was lots of fun. It was very engaging. And then 2015 happened. We worked in Montreal for a candidate there and lost to a Liberal, like many did in that red wave of 2015.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I just wanted to fight to win back government.
Yeah.
So I was very excited about it. I attended all the Conservative conferences and events, and it all came to a head at the Manning Conference, which is a big Conservative conference in Ottawa.
Okay.
It was in February, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided that it's time to run, and I want to do something for the people of Vancouver Centre.
Okay. So you went to McGill.
Yeah.
What did you study at McGill?
I did a Bachelor of Commerce,
okay.
So a business degree. I am a very business-minded person.
Yeah.
And I did international management, and I minored in poli-sci because politics is a big passion of mine.
Yeah,
so I loved the business side, get my job and work in finance, but also keep my passion and study politics as well.
Yeah. And have you always been interested in politics since you were a young guy, or?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've always kind of kept an eye on the news, and I always wanted to see what was going on, and it affects everyone's life very intricately, and I think a lot of people lose sight of that every little announcement that the government makes can have a big impact on you 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
So I've always been acutely aware of what's going on.
Okay. And that was obvious. I mean, if you were part of the Conservative movement in McGill as a student, so tell me a little bit more just before we go into your goal of becoming elected as an MP, because I don't know enough about how it works at a student level. What is it? Is it more just a like-minded people, and they have maybe the Liberals have also a student body of some type, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a little bit different with the Liberals and the Conservatives.
Okay.
So the Conservatives have university, they're called Conservative Associations at whatever university.
Okay.
The Liberals have the Young Liberals of Canada, and they're kind of siphoned off as that.
Yeah.
The Conservatives like to say that the youth are included with everybody, so they're not in the sandbox to the side. The Liberals like to push the youth out and say, here's your sandbox, young Liberals, go play there. And if you have any ideas, we'll send it up to us. We may look at it.
Yeah.
Conservatives are a very grassroots party, and so they include everybody. And we're just a group at the university. So if someone is coming through, an MP, then we'll perhaps host an event, and all the students can talk to the MP and hear some ideas.
Yeah.
So it was very fun. For example, we were there for the leadership race.
Yeah.
So almost all the leadership candidates came through. So that was a very busy year for us, and it was tons of fun.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really good. Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Vancouver.
Okay.
Born and raised.
Yeah.
Children's Hospital,
Yeah.
like many of us. And I'm back here after going to McGill.
And I'm assuming that you live in Vancouver Centre, do you? Or
I actually live just south in Vancouver Granville.
Okay.
But I work in Vancouver Centre.
Yeah.
And I'm also planning to move into the West End, but our housing affordability is kind of a big issue here.
Sure.
So I'm also affected by that, like many people who live in the city.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, let's get into this. So you're running against Hedy Fry. I mean, you're running against other candidates as well, but let's be honest. I mean, you're running against somebody who's been in this role since 1993, is expected to probably win again. What do you bring to the table that Hedy doesn't bring to the table?
So I think the very obvious thing is I'm very young compared to her who's been there longer than I've been born.
Yeah.
And so I have a new, fresh perspective on politics. I don't want to be like Hedy, who's the local apologist for Ottawa.
Right.
It kind of comes from
local
Ottawa.
Apologist, I love that. That's great.
She just gets the talking points from Ottawa and she'll just like splurt it out in Vancouver Centre and just hope it sells.
Right.
And I think she's lost touch with the riding.
Yeah.
It's been, it's just sad. Like we hear all these residents who are having huge problems with housing, and there's mental health issues in the riding, and there's lots of homeless people, and people are having a really hard time getting ahead, and things are getting more expensive, and we don't have an MP who's listening to you. She's just Ottawa's puppet.
Yeah.
And she's been like that for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's a lot of the same, and I didn't tell you anything about my conversation with Breen, who we had in here from the NDP, who's one of your competing constituents, and he said pretty much the same thing. But let's talk about you for a moment, because those are the things that you've pointed out so far are things that, other than your youth, are things that you think are problematic with Hedy. What is it you bring to, like, why would, if I was and I am one of those swing voters, as we talked about earlier before we got on camera, if I was in Vancouver Centre, what is it about David Cavey that would make me want to vote for you and not for Hedy?
Great question. So I'm very, very committed and hardworking.
Yeah.
I'm so passionate about politics and listening to people.
Yeah.
So my favorite thing to do is door knock. I love door knocking. Like I love knocking on all the doors and going in a condo and then just chatting with everybody, seeing like I always
That's probably
ask
the
people,
first big challenge, right? It's almost all condos in Vancouver Centre, so it's probably a bit of a challenge, I imagine.
Yeah, we have a whole team working on building access. They're legally supposed to give us access, but there's difficulties in that as well.
I see.
Working our best on it.
Yeah.
But I love door knocking.
Yeah.
So I always ask residents, like, what is the biggest issue for you in this election? And I hear.
And what are you
things.
hearing?
A lot of affordability.
Okay.
Like people are having trouble getting by.
Yeah.
They're like, they say half of Canadians now are less than $200 away from defaulting every month on their bills.
Yeah.
And that's shocking to me that half of Canadians are having extreme trouble getting by. And then we're seeing new taxes with this Liberal government.
Yeah.
And like a carbon tax that's making everything more expensive in this country.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So what do you see as being the solution from a housing perspective that you'd be able to bring to Ottawa? How would you help with that? I mean, obviously the Conservative Party has some views. Maybe you support those, but and if you do, let's speak to those. Let's hear what is your view? I mean, what is David Cavey's solution or movement towards better affordability, especially since you're a perfect candidate? I mean, you're going to speak about yourself, like you're a young guy like you trying to get ahead in this Vancouver Centre.
Yeah, of course. So housing also affects me like everybody else.
Yeah.
I also want to live in a beautiful penthouse condo downtown. We all would, but it's very hard to get there in Vancouver. So affordability is the biggest thing that we're trying to help with the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
So that may not help housing directly, but it'll put more money in your pocket so that you can afford the skyrocketing housing prices.
Yeah.
They've also committed to looking at the mortgage stress test to see how they can make it better for new home buyers and helping young Canadians just get ahead with putting more money in their pocket. Just a basic Conservative tenet.
Okay. So one of the ideas, it sounds like, is just minimizing or trying to take back some of these tax burdens that the Liberal government has been imposing on Canadians to give people more money, put it back in their pocket so they actually have more money to work with in the first place. But you also brought up an interesting point, which is the stress test. Now, I'm pretty sure I got it right, but I believe the stress test is the structure is that if you're getting an approved insured mortgage, which most young people that are trying to get into the market are doing through CMHC, your approval with the bank has to be based on the current rates plus 2%.
That's right.
And the problem that I see with this, I mean, it's a really, conceptually it's a great idea because it helps ensure that people can well, as the name describes, deal with the stress of rising interest rate, a stress test. But interest rates aren't rising. In fact, the central bank of the European Central Bank today just cut interest rates by 10 basis points.
Yeah.
A month ago, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates by 25 basis points. Like we're going into negative interest rates, deeper into negative interest rates in many parts of the world. So it seems odd to me right now that the government hasn't addressed the fact that like we're not in a rising rate environment. In the meantime, it's made it more problematic for people because you have to have this higher bar to meet to get into the market now.
Absolutely. And also their policy on is 4 times income is how you can apply that. It's like the shared mortgage they have with CMHC.
Right.
And that doesn't really apply in Vancouver because no condo is worth that little.
Yes.
And so for people like me looking at that, I'm like, I can't even use this tool that the federal government has kind of waved in our face because it's irrelevant in Vancouver or Toronto, and our real estate prices are just through the roof.
Yeah. You know, someone who I admire a lot, Laurel Collins, who's the NDP candidate for Victoria Centre, actually has talked about this recently herself. And what I saw this, I don't caught this, but I saw this on the news ticker this morning that Justin Trudeau has just announced that they're increasing the threshold on that price of a home from $500 and whatever it was, $505,000 or $508,000 to $800,000, which might help a community like somebody who's in Victoria Centre. But even at $800,000, like you're pretty limited in what you can choose from for a home in Vancouver Centre. So
absolutely. So we look at the country and the real estate is so vastly different when we go from like Vancouver to Winnipeg, for example, or if we go to Fredericton and New Brunswick. So why is the policy equal across the entire country when the disparity is huge? And so if we're looking at that policy, the goal obviously is to help people gain home ownership, especially young people. And I think the policy needs to look at those regional disparities to ensure that it's fair across the country. Like if I want to live in Vancouver, I was born and raised here, and I want to stay here, I want to raise a family here, I need to have a home to do that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Now, when you say home, do you mean a house with like a white picket fence and a backyard and a front yard, or are you okay with a condo? I'm
okay with a condo, honestly. I can embrace that life, no problem. But I think there's always a draw to also having your white picket fence and your nice lawn and everything like that. But as we get more developed and urbanized, I think we're all going to be moving toward condos and also like that. So.
I often talk about that with my friends and anybody who's willing to listen to me, that, you know, I think there needs to be a mental shift in the primary city cores of like at least Vancouver and Toronto and probably Montreal, which is like the idea of having a home, a house, is bit of a, it's really unfortunate just for the elite few today, and it probably won't ever change. I mean, if you go to major cities like Hong Kong, Shanghai, Paris, nobody actually owns homes unless you're like the president. And so I think that's something that people just have to. But that being said, even if we're talking about condos and townhouses, you're right. It's an absolutely real challenge as far as like getting into the market.
Yeah, extremely.
Something else. And by the way, did we have that piece come out? Did you find it there? Can you just scroll up here for a second, Ross? What is it? What does the headline say? Federal government proposes more help for first-time home buyers in Mississauga, but I mean this can apply to everywhere. So what have they written? At a campaign stop in British Columbia, of course, Trudeau's probably still here because their bus got smoked by their plane got smoked by their bus, right? It's just so perfect. I mean, Trudeau announced the government's plan to increase the value of the qualifying home from $500,000 to closer to $800,000. Here's the thing that I also find, I don't know if you notice this, and maybe you can speak to, maybe there's a strategy behind this, but it seems to me like Trudeau is out there handing out, like he's handing out these sort of gifts or these promises left, right, and center right now, it seems to me like just trying to win votes. Like, oh, vote for me. And I'm looking at going like, well, you've had 4 years, man. If going from $500,000 to $800,000 was the solution, you just figure this out in the last 2 weeks? Is there a strategy behind this?
Well, I looked at something like this because I didn't know this was announced. It was announced, I think, a couple hours ago today.
Yeah, you were probably on transit here when this got announced.
Exactly. And so when I look at something like this was announced by the Liberals originally with the $500,000 cap like a year ago. And so did the policy fail a year ago? Why are they looking at it again? Are they realizing that maybe they took shortcuts and they failed there, and now they're changing it again.
Yeah.
I don't know where, like, if there's strategy behind that. Did they screw up? Did they realize that it didn't apply to cities like Vancouver and Toronto? Like, I don't know where the policy hat is on that, and I don't think we know the Liberal government, the Trudeau Liberals, are not very strong on the policy side. They're not. So
they're also
it's
not
also vote buying. Like you saw in the last 2
word
months.
I was looking for. Vote buying.
Absolutely. So in the last 2 months, we saw an unprecedented amount of spending announcements right before the writ was dropped.
Yes.
It was like 10 times, I think, or more than that, than what Harper did before in 2015. It's shocking. And that's just vote buying.
Okay. So you admit every party does this, but this is done to another scale with this current administration.
Well, like there's always going to be spending announcements before an election, but when you can see that it's at unprecedented levels that's never been seen before, you start to look twice. Yeah. And
Ross, if you pull up GC Newsroom Twitter feed and you look on there, I don't know if you follow that one, but I follow it because I'm a big critic of the amount of spending that goes on in our government. And it's mind blowing what you're talking about. Like it has, I noticed that. Like you'd go, typically if I was going back, say a year ago, you would on average see maybe 5 to maybe 15 posts a day, which and they're not all spending posts. Like and this is the Government of Canada newsroom feed, Twitter feed. So it announces any kind of like maybe an MP is traveling to a foreign country for a delegation for delegate meetings. So nothing to do with spending. But now they're just like, it's like, you're right. If you scroll back about a week ago, it's unbelievable. They're like 15, 20 announcements a day just on spends.
Yeah, it's insane. And what they're also running a deficit. Let's not forget.
Right.
So the Trudeau Liberals are running a deficit and they're buying votes with your money. They're bribing you with your own money.
Borrowed money.
Yeah.
It's not my money. It's my kids' money.
Exactly.
Because it's not money we have.
So they're bribing you with your children's money, and they're taking money out of one pocket and returning less of it into your other.
Yeah. Now your career has been largely, or your young career has been largely in the financial services industry.
That's right.
So and you talked about the deficit. Is fiscal responsibility something that you believe you can bring to the table?
Absolutely.
I think we planted question, but it seems like it would be.
Absolutely. I think we can solve all of our issues while also being fiscally responsible. And I think it's very irresponsible to look at and just say, we're going to run a deficit because we want to make all these spending announcements and we want to make all these promises. But why can't you do and fulfill all your goals while also being fiscally responsible? It doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of lazy, to be honest.
Yeah.
And they should look a little bit more closely at where all the money is being spent and make sure that you're being responsible. We have to be responsible as personal. Like I have to budget every month. I'm sure we all do.
Yeah.
And so why can't our government do the same thing?
Sure. I'm a big believer that the government already has enough money. They just need to do better with what they've got. In fact, they could probably have a lot less. And if they're really smart with their money, they would be able to tax everybody a little bit less and still deliver on the really important services like healthcare and education, that type of thing. Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the recent Pride Parade, because I understand you made a bit of headline news in this as well. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we withdrew in support of UBC and the Vancouver Public Library. They're banned for just hosting speakers.
Okay, so just slow down a little bit. So when you say we, who were you talking about?
So I withdrew my participation, and that included the Electoral District Association,
okay,
so the Conservative Vancouver Centre Association, and myself, because we're the ones who had the spot in the parade.
Yeah.
So in consultation,
it's right in your riding, right?
Exactly.
The parade itself. Absolutely. Just to be clear, everybody understands.
And so with consultation with our board, we all pulled out.
And why did you do that?
Because we were standing up for our public institutions who were just simply doing their job. They're required by law to host speakers of all types as long as it's within limits of the law. And they were hosting speakers. The Pride Society didn't like them. And
which public institutions are we talking about specifically here?
The Public Library,
okay,
and UBC.
And UBC. So UBC and the Public Library hosted some kind of speakers that what is it called? The Pride Society?
The Vancouver Pride Society.
Vancouver Pride Society. And they're the ones that run the parade?
They are.
Okay. And they weren't going to allow UBC or Vancouver Public Library to participate in the parade because of certain speakers that they allowed to bring to their
to campus and to the library.
And to the library. Yeah. And what kind of speakers are we talking about here? Do you have any idea? Or
well, they said these speakers were transphobic and whatever, but we're not talking about the content or what the speakers were talking about. The fact was they just didn't like the speakers, and so they punish our public institutions for just
Right.
doing their job.
Yeah.
And so I will always stand up for our public institutions
Sure.
when I see that there's an injustice there.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that Pride is inclusive.
Yeah.
I'm a huge advocate for that. I'm an advocate for the LGBT community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm
Yeah.
very supportive of them. And I
Yeah.
want to make sure that these events are inclusive because
Yeah.
it's stated in their mission statement that they're an
Wasn't that
inclusive
the irony
event.
though? Like, isn't the
Absolutely
irony
it
of
is,
this whole
yeah.
thing is that, we are inclusive and but yet it's not really. It's more like we're inclusive as long as you buy into our agenda.
Absolutely.
That's what
yeah.
it seems like to me.
Yeah. So you
I'm
can't tell Canadians and tell people that, oh, we're this inclusive parade. Oh, and now here, we're going to get $1 million in federal taxpayer money to run this parade and then start kicking out our public institutions just because you've got your feelings upset.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm drinking the same Kool-Aid you are. Andrew Scheer did not participate in the Vancouver Pride Parade, and that was a lot of press around that as well. Whereas Jagmeet Singh was there. In fact, there's a picture of Jagmeet Singh, Elizabeth May, and Justin Trudeau in the Vancouver Pride Parade. I'll just speak to my view, and then you can tell me what your thoughts are. I personally couldn't give a shit, to be honest with you, whether my leader or potential prime minister is in the Gay Pride Parade or not. Because to me, what's way more important is what that person makes decisions around when it comes to policies in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sorry, but just for me, it doesn't really matter. It's could be you could view it as being symbolic, but I like to think that our society is way past where we were 20, 30 years ago. I mean, not to take away the importance of the Gay Pride Parade, I think, or the Pride Parade. I think it's a really fun event, but I feel like its meaning isn't as meaningful today as it was 30 years ago, only because we've moved past that. We've evolved. We're a better society for being inclusive of that community. And I was amazed at how much he was getting roasted for not showing up to this thing, because I look at it and go, like, what's more important, that your MP or your prime minister does the right thing in Ottawa as far as policy making is concerned? Because that's, to me, what government does. They make
Mm-hmm. policies
and they tax us,
Mm-hmm.
and like everything else, nothing else really matters. Like, those are the actions that are really important, not whether you show up at a Pride Parade or not. What are your thoughts?
Well, the Pride Parade now, we can see it's just become a photo op, right? So Justin Trudeau shows up, waves the flag, takes 1 billion photos and says, I support the community. And I think supporting the community, it goes far beyond marching in the parade. And like you said,
That's
it's
what I'm
about
talking
the
about.
policy. So
Yeah.
Andrew Scheer stood up and he gave the opposition speech on LGBT issues after Trudeau did. He also he fights for the rights of LGBT Canadians at home and abroad, and he's made speeches about that in Parliament, and that's what's important. And marching in any parade is not enough to show support for any community. It's not even relevant in my mind. Like, there's so many parades every weekend,
Yeah.
and do we see all of our leaders marching in all the parades?
No.
Like, did he march in the St. Patrick's Day parade? I don't know. If
Yeah.
a leader doesn't march in that parade, do they hate Irish people? I don't know.
Such a good
it's,
point.
It's ridiculous. Like, it's just a parade, right? And I wouldn't be running for member of parliament if I thought my leader didn't support that community, and I'll make that very clear.
Yeah.
So I can say with full faith that there's nothing to worry about with regards to.
Now, this LGBTQ community, and I hope people don't get offended if I sound like I'm not saying it right, because I am a little bit ignorant in this space, but it seems to me like, going back to Hedy Fry, she's got and I maybe this is politically incorrect to say, but she's got the gay vote. I mean, that she's had it for years. I think that's part of the reason why she's been so strong. And I think one of the main reasons was because, I mean, you think about how long she's been in this role. She was a big advocate for making sure, or she wanted to have people who were infected with AIDS to have access to medication without having to bankrupt them. And I think that she got a lot of positive, she got a lot of lifelong fans because of that, and her advocating for that community. Do you have any thoughts comments around your support for that community? Because it is obviously a large LGBTQ community in the Vancouver Centre. Can you tell us more about your support for that community? What kind of things would you do to represent those people in Ottawa?
So I'm hugely supportive of the community. Last night I was at Fountainhead and Junction. I went to a drag show last night.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of the Davie Street Village. I'm there frequently. But at the end of the day, it's listening to the residents. I think that running on one issue is never smart.
Yeah.
And voting on one issue. So I think LGBT Canadians are also, they're faced with affordability issues just like everyone else.
It doesn't make them different.
No, it doesn't.
Their paychecks are just not meeting the affordable costs.
Absolutely. And it's just one part of who they are, but they're also Canadians who suffer from affordability, housing. They're affected by the carbon tax. They're affected by everything else that's going on in this government. And I think Hedy's support, like when her popularity occurred when she was in 1993, before I was born. Yes, she got some lifelong supporters, but we're seeing now her support is crumbling. She's not nearly as popular as she once was, and I'm hearing that every day on the doors. People are not a fan of Hedy Fry. And I think it's sad to see that. That the community, I don't know where like the statistics come from, like, oh, she gets the gay vote, or but I can say I absolutely support the community. I love going to all the events, and I'll continue to do so.
Now she is you mentioned, she I think we clarified she's like 78, I think, and she'll be over 80 by the time if she does win again in this next term. She's going to have a heck of a pension, that's for sure. And we've been hearing that she's not made herself available to kind of like, people on the street. When it comes to yourself, let's say you do win this election and you become the MP. How are you going to make yourself available? What are you going to do for the local constituents so that they don't feel like they've just got another younger version of a Hedy Fry?
So like I said earlier on, I'm very committed and very hardworking, and I want to listen to people. And it's so important to me when I say I love door knocking, because I like hearing from everyday people. That's really what I'm passionate about. So being in the constituency office, actually showing up to all the community events. She has a terrible attendance record at community events and a horrendous voting record in Parliament. It's amongst the worst.
What do you mean by horrendous voting record? I mean,
she doesn't show up. She doesn't vote. She misses.
Really?
She misses the votes.
Really?
And it's
where
very
is she?
hard. I don't know. That's like I don't know if we should start trending like hashtag Where is Hedy, because it's a common problem that we've had.
Where is Hedy?
So
I can imagine all the memes and where's Waldo, and that's a good one. Well, here's the other thing that my observation, and I'm sure my bias is kind of coming through in this interview, and I don't mean it to be, but it seems to me like she's a toe the party line kind of individual. And I have to tell you, like, to challenge you, one of my concerns or issues I have as a voter with the Conservative Party and Liberal Party, more so than any other party, is what I view as being like, this is the party line, and there's not a lot of independent belief or thoughts or allowance for that at the constituent level, like at the individual MP level. So when I look at Hedy, it seems to me like I didn't see her standing up for Jody Wilson-Raybould.
No, absolutely not.
She didn't get, I don't know that I don't know what her position is on the pipeline, but I believe you should have one position or the other. It doesn't seem to me like she just seemed to go along with whatever Justin Trudeau is saying. What are your thoughts on that comment? And to challenge you also in the Conservative Party, is that the case with the Conservative Party as well?
Well, we stay within our boundaries. So I think we're all united by our ideology. Like we're deeply rooted conservatives, and that can mean a little bit, it can be a little bit different to everybody.
Yes.
And we also have to look, like the brand of conservatism in Canada is very different than in the US and abroad, right?
Yeah.
And so when we say toe the party line, it's often, we're also almost always all in agreement anyway.
Okay.
And sometimes we have issues, let's say on a policy or whatever, but we voice that. So we have our caucus meetings and we'll sit with everybody and we'll voice it.
Yeah.
And then we come out united on our issues.
Okay.
And there's some things that I think from being a member of parliament and representing a constituency, so Vancouver Centre, let's say, there are local issues that you need to champion and you need to take back to that caucus table.
Yeah.
And when you have an MP like Hedy Fry who doesn't listen to residents and she's absent all the time, she knows she's not listening. So where is your representation in Ottawa when your MP is not here?
Yeah.
And so I've made it very clear that I want to listen and I want to be present and I want to show up to everything and I want to hear from everyday people so I can bring that to our caucus table and voice all those concerns I hear off the street into the caucus meeting so that we can affect change for everybody.
Yeah.
They've been missing that in Vancouver Centre for a long time.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's good. That's a good answer. Let's maybe, to go back to the Conservative Party then, you've obviously been involved with the Conservative movement, sounds like most of your adult life. What are some of the most, assume that I know nothing about politics. What are the most sort of clear and obvious conservative beliefs or conservative policies that are a stark difference from the Liberals that if I had a room full of Conservative MPs, pretty much everybody would agree on? This is fine. I want to start with a policy of any type, you pick a couple that you could say, you know what, this is what the Conservative Party stands for. And I'm pretty sure if you surveyed, a bunch, 20, 30 Conservatives, they'd all probably be in agreement. And even when it got down to the policy level, they'd probably all agree because it's just such a fundamental part of who we are.
I think for me, it's fiscal responsibility.
Okay.
So like I said before, we can achieve all the goals while being fiscally responsible. And it's really important that we're not burdening our children, our grandchildren, and like starting with my generation and then my children with debt and taxes. Because what happens is we go into debt and then you raise taxes, and that harms everyday people who are just trying to get by. And so in this election, I say to people all the time, I say, your one question is, who do you trust more to put, or who do you trust to put more money in your pocket?
Right.
Which party? And I overwhelmingly hear the Conservative Party. Do you think Justin Trudeau is going to put more money in your pocket?
No.
Yeah. He's going to raise taxes like he has, and he's going to continue to do so and mismanage, and then flip-flop on policy.
Do you think the average voter, and I don't mean to sound belittling, but do you think the average voter really gets, that's a part of frustration I have, is that I wonder if people just don't see the impact of like all this money being spent. They don't really see it. Okay, so the government has more debt, big deal. Like it doesn't really affect me. Do you think people see that?
Well, there's always a delay, right? So if there's a spending and out, like things don't come to fruition instantly, right? So it takes time. So we always say, like, when Conservatives get in power, we go in, and the first couple of years we're just cleaning up the Liberal mess from before, because now we're tasked with that. So then, for example, Canada came out of 2008 quite well. And that was under Jim Flaherty, our Conservative finance minister. And look where we are today. We have a great economy today. But then who inherited that? The Liberals. And then the Liberals said, oh, that was us. And we're like, no, it wasn't. That was the Conservatives. And they said, well, the economy was not great because of, under the Conservatives, we're like, well, that's because 2008 happened. The financial crisis. So it's just a blame game that goes back and forth. But I think Canadians understand that the Conservatives are so fiscally responsible, and they take that very seriously because they want to ensure that we have a sustainable government for future generations.
Okay. Do you have any specific views on if you were an MP voting in Ottawa, fast forward to November, December, do you have any particular things that you would want to see from a fiscal responsibility perspective change almost immediately, that you would be like right at the front of the line saying this is something we want to change right away?
Oh, balancing the budget. So I don't think that can be done right away, because cleaning up the Liberal mess, and we're seeing our deficits just ballooning under this Liberal government. We can't just flip the switch and be like, wow, it's balanced. It just doesn't happen like that. But that's something I would fight for every day to ensure, because I don't want, when I'm 50 years old, or God forbid Hedy's age, have to pay ballooning taxes, and then maybe even consider like, wow, I can't live in this country anymore. It's ridiculous. Like, I'll move somewhere else. And we don't want to be losing talent in this country because of our high taxes. Okay.
Is there anything more specific within balancing the budget? Like, is there any ways in which you would either, because to balance a budget, just be on the most simplest level, you either have to raise revenue, which would be generating revenue through primarily taxes, but maybe there's other ways of doing that, or you lower your spending. So is there any specific areas you've looked at that you go, you know what, this is an obvious one to me that I'd be right in support of right away?
Well, in general, we do both. So we create economic opportunity, create bigger pie, so that the economy is just larger in general. So you don't necessarily have to cut spending.
That's a good point.
So you can maintain your social services and all the things that we enjoy as Canadians, but also rev up the economy, and the economy is doing better. And then we don't have this problem with cutting spending. So as Conservatives, we also focus on that. So making more economic opportunity, making sure businesses are more successful. Like, don't forget, Justin Trudeau called our small businesses tax cheats in this country.
Yeah, he did.
And we're big supporters of small business moms and dads who are they're the bulk of our country, the lifeblood of what makes us Canadians. Those small businesses employ the vast majority of Canadians. So we're huge supporters of that, and we want to make sure that they're successful moving forward and not called tax cheats.
Okay, good. That's good. Let's talk about something you want to talk about, because I've asked a lot of questions, but do you have any? Let's open it up. Do you have anything in particular you want to? This is your platform to kind of get your name and word out there and your views.
Sure. I'm really fighting for, as well, as a government that's ethical. And it really bothers me looking at the Trudeau Liberals right now and seeing what's happened with Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott, and just seeing the lies and the broken promises.
Sure.
And it makes my heart break when people like yourself, when they say they voted Liberal in 2015, there was all this hope and optimism, and people were excited.
Doing business, doing government differently. And,
yes,
all
this and sunny ways and all that. It all came crashing down, and I think Canadians have never been more disappointed in our government and our Prime Minister. And I'm not even a Liberal, and I won't vote Liberal. I'm a diehard Conservative, but I'm also shocked and upset because, like, to some degree, you lose an election and you're like, well, there's hope and optimism on some degree. Maybe things will be okay. And things went horribly wrong. Yeah. And so I'm fighting to get that Conservatives back in government and get elected so that we can help Canadians get back on track. Yeah.
Now, when we had Breen here from the NDP, and I asked him a similar question, and I said, like, so I'd like you to answer this. Maybe actually I'll ask you first and then I'll tell you what he said.
Okay.
What do you think it is that's still getting Hedy these votes? What do you think the average Vancouver Centre voter is going, at the end of the day, when they get into that ballot box area and they go to check that box, they're like, I'm going to vote for Hedy again. What do you think their reasoning is behind that?
Honestly, I think she's very well known. Yeah. So like even today when I saw her, like she'll know the doorman and she'll know that people just know who she is. And there's new candidates every election for the NDP, the Greens, and for the Conservatives. Yeah. So the candidates aren't as well known. And I think that it's kind of the default vote. It's kind of like, I don't really know what I'm going to vote for. I'm going to pick the middle. Yeah. And pick Hedy. She's been here, whatever. But I'm here to highlight that she's not been a good member of parliament, and she's had her days in the sun. So she's done good work, and we thank her for all of her work over the last 26 years. Yeah. But there's an expiry date on that. Yeah. And I think we need someone who's actually listening to the residents here. Yeah, sure. And I'm working very, very, very hard. I'm door knocking already. We did 375 doors yesterday. We're going out door knocking tomorrow.
Good for you.
And just someone, I want to work hard and show everyone in the next 40 days that I'm going to work hard. I'm going to be the guy who's going to listen to you, and I'm going to represent you well in Ottawa, which has been obviously lacking.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Well, I will tell you now what Breen said, and he said his view. I think he said this, Ross. He said it's the fear vote. It's like she's kind of putting fear that you don't want to vote for one of the other parties because you don't know what you're going to get. I don't know if you believe that or not, but I kind of buy that. I feel like that's maybe part of the reason why people continue to vote for her as well. I don't know.
Could be, yeah. They're just maybe a little uncomfortable with the change, and they don't really know what's coming down the pipeline. But that's also our job as candidates to show you who we are, what we're fighting for, and hopefully we can make that case so we can get their vote.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's great. Well, we're going to take a quick break with David Cavey.
Yeah, that's right.
Did I say it right? Because I think you've been called Cavey, but it's David Cavey.
It's Cavey, yeah.
And then we'll come right back in just a moment.
Great.
All right, we're back with David Cavey. We're gonna wrap this up really quick, but I gotta before you leave, I gotta nail you on a subject here that is talked about always. It's talked about in Vancouver, and it's definitely talked about in the press, and that's around energy. Okay, so I'll start, and then you can respond. I mean, the Conservative Party is very clear. They want to get a pipeline built, and they will get a pipeline built, and we're talking about twinning or expanding the TMX pipeline that already exists. A pipeline, so for people that don't know, there's already a pipeline that basically runs from Alberta here to BC, and then we're shipping oil off of the coast of British Columbia to various parts of the world. And look, my position personally, and I think it's good to just clarify my position, because I think I'm the kind of person that's probably going to be the swing voter you're looking to try and pick up. I believe in fiscal responsibility. I believe in economic development. I really believe in supporting the people of Alberta, because I go there all the time. I see how tough life is in Calgary and various parts of Alberta today. And we're not going to get off oil tomorrow. And I'm also I'm very passionate about the environment. So I think that it's unrealistic to just carry on as we were 20, 30 years ago with just massive expansion of oil expansion, and not thinking about alternative uses of energy. But I also think it's completely unrealistic to think that we can just get off of oil tomorrow. Where I am concerned, and so I would say I'm a pro pipeline, but I'm anti oil spill, right? And I'm really worried about like a 7-fold increase, or 12, whatever the number is, 12-fold increase in oil tanker traffic going underneath the Lionsgate Bridge. I'm really worried about, we have orcas, as you know. There's been some sighted this summer, like right in our harbor here. It's unbelievable. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of tourism, and it's a big part of the West Coast culture. Like, So how do you address that? Can you comment on that?
Of course. So I'm also pro-pipeline, but anti-oil in the water. I am very much so against any of that. And as you were saying, it's all about a balance here. And it's very important to strike that balance properly. And I think that the needle has shifted on where that balance is going to land. And I think we're taking it very seriously on all the impacts and ensuring that all of the safety check marks have been completed before any project is built. We can't forget that energy is what pays for our standard of living in this country. It's what built this country. It pays for our schools, our hospitals, and everything that we enjoy as Canadians. And yes, we're looking for alternative sources of energy, but again, it's a balance.
Yeah.
And
we're selling the damn oil at a discount in Alberta.
Absolutely.
Because you can't get it shipped. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
It is. It's going for a discount into the United States, and then we're buying it back more expensive.
Yeah.
So why can't we do it ourselves?
Our jet fuel from YVR. If you ever fly out of a plane out of YVR. Most of that jet fuel is actually coming from the United States because we can't get it from Canada, even though we have it.
Yeah, so why can't we do it ourselves? And on top of that, the Conservatives had said we want all of our energy to be domestic. Why are we importing oil from Saudi Arabia? It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. Okay, but that being said, just to be fair and to be, to challenge you on this, what other than, twinning the pipeline, that's the easy part. That's the pro-pipeline part, right? Okay, twin it, get it out here. How would you... Which ways would you, as an MP for Vancouver Centre in Ottawa, ensure that you're carrying on with that conservative view of let's be pro-business, but also addressing your local constituents around protecting our precious, West Coast waters?
Absolutely. So it's again the balance. So I always like to engage people who want to have the conversation where we're not all or none here. We're not all pipelines or no pipelines. Right. And that's not like the conversation I like to have.
That's a good point.
I want to talk to people who want to find that balance because at the end of the day, there is going to be some sort of balance and we need to know how to strike that balance. So we want to hear what the biggest concerns are on both sides of that argument so that we can strike the right balance. Yeah. And so when I engage people who are, let's say they really don't like pipelines, they're like, I don't want a pipeline. These are the reasons why. I want to listen and I want to say, we're going to be striking a balance. As Conservatives, we've made that clear. And I will fight to make sure that all those concerns are heard so that the right balance is struck and maybe the needle is even turned to help address those concerns.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like the Liberals have got this thing figured out. No. Although they bought the pipeline, which I think is a foolish move. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we're all now part owners of a pipeline as Canadians, which I think is quite funny. And it's shocking. They're flip-floppy. They seemed like they knew what they were doing when they did that, and then there's been no shovels in the ground. So what's the plan here? And now taxpayers on the hook for that pipeline. Why do I don't want to be a part owner of a pipeline as a taxpayer. We should have businesses build these pipelines. That's their job. It's not a government's job to build pipelines. And so I think it's quite ironic that this government did that, and now it's just made it worse for everybody. And so why can't we have a government that's principled and says what they're going to do?
Okay, that's good. One more question on this, going back to the safety of our waters. Have you heard of any? So if, let's say I'm that voter, that swing voter, and I like you, and I think you're the guy I want to vote for, but I just need to be convinced that you've got some idea about how you're going to protect our water if you do. Let's say I'm all for twinning the pipeline. Have you heard of any ideas or ways in which we can ensure that the water is protected? Is there any kind of, and I'm talking at a very sort of granular level. Have you heard any?
Absolutely. We actually are developing a policy right now that's going to be coming out from locally, and it's going to address water in Vancouver Centre, and so we're very excited about that policy that's going to be coming out. I can't give you too many details right now, but look, at the end of the day, we all want clean air and clean water, and I will fight for that for everybody. Again, I'm also very anti-oil spills in the water. We don't want that, and we're very clear. So we're striking the balance as best as we can. Okay,
great. To wrap this up and for a little plug with yourself, so do you have a Twitter handle?
I do.
What's your Twitter handle?
It's my name, @David
Okay. So David Cavey, and Cavey spelled?
Cavey.
Okay, great. And if people want to get involved with your running for this role of MP, get involved, what are you looking for right now? Obviously donations would be helpful, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so donations are always great, and also volunteers. So we go door knocking almost every day. So we always need help with that, and in our office, and we do lots of phone banking, we call people. So I'm basically working my hardest to reach every resident in this riding. I want to have 86,000 conversations with every eligible voter.
Yeah.
And so that requires phone banking. It requires tons of volunteers. We have a lot of logistics. We have events. And it's quite exciting. Like the energy in our campaign office is quite contagious. So I'd encourage anyone to get involved.
You had Michelle Rempel with you. You guys, I saw that tweet last night. You guys were in a car and it looks. She's great. I love her energy. Yeah.
She's awesome.
Where's your office based on? You guys have a constituency office?
We do. It's on 2nd Avenue, right by Granville Island, between Pine and Fir.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, David, thanks for coming here today. Best of luck.
Thank you
I
very
hope
much.
you do really well. I love your energy, and we'll see how things pan out on October 21st.
That's right.
Okay. Good luck, David Cavey, constituent candidate for the Conservative Party for Vancouver.